I'd like to introduce you to someone. She lives in a mud home. 1 out of every 6 of her children will die at birth. And out of the 5 that live, 1 out of every 5 will die by the age of 5. She's depressed. Sometimes she's lonely. She's strong-willed and very compassionate. She has a lot of influence in her home and family life that does not reflect in her public status on how she's perceived. We see it as oppression. In their country and in their lifestyle, they see it as a way to protect themselves. It's a level of honor and respect to be hidden sometimes. I'm going to share with you my experience with female engagement. And some of the things that I learned surprised me, and it may just surprise you too. It all started for me in Iraq. I was on a patrol in Ramadi in the spring of 2006, and I was going to write a story as a journalist on the civil affairs teams and what they do to go in and talk with the people, and then what they do with that information to build governance and help with economic and development initiatives. Well, we go into the house, and I sat and watched as the male team leader spoke with the head of the household that was male, and the women had all been ushered into the next room. And they kept peeking around the door, and they noticed I was a female. So they were waving invitations at me to come in. So naturally, I did. I went in, and I started talking with them. And I realized through the course of this conversation with these Iraqi women that we as in the military, we were missing half of the information. We were missing the needs and the desires and the information from the women. The women who were charged with raising the next generation. The generation who we were hoping would choose an alternate means of livelihood other than to support the insurgency. Because that's what a counterinsurgency is all about. It's about separating the people from the insurgency so that the government can build a strong and secure nation. Well, I didn't write that story. I did write a military point paper, and I proposed the following questions. If we're not able to talk to and interact with half the population because our male service members couldn't interact culturally with these women, how do we know if we're implementing the right plans and programs on the ground? Well, I thought that this paper would get into the hands of some brilliant Marine officer to do something about it. But you can imagine my surprise when the Brigadier General stopped me on the way back from the chow hall and recognized my name tape and said, "I read your paper. You're right. This is something we need to do, and I want you to tell me how we do it." So for the next 5 months of my deployment, that's what I did. I went to find the answer of how we engage with these women in such a dynamic security environment. These women have a lot of influence in their home, and I'm going to talk about why women matter. Why do they matter in such an area? Well, it wasn't just the women that mattered. It was who I was, who I needed to be, who I needed to talk to, and what I needed to do after the engagement that mattered. Now, I want you to think of your home, the home you grew up in or the home you're in now. And I want you to think of the phrase, if mom's not happy, then no one's happy. Okay? Now I want you to think of a whole community of women who had very reason to be unhappy. They had lack of security. They lived in fear and intimidation, access to health care and education for themselves and their kids. The employment situation was pretty hard. What do you go in and talk to these women about? Well, my friend and I, my two-man team, or a two-woman team, we were both mothers. And we decided the night before we were going to meet with this large group of women in Iraq that we were going to share the fact that we were mothers of a world family, that we're sisters of a community, and that it was the Marines weren't going to be there for very long, and that we needed them as women to do what they could to come together. Now, what's interesting is that these groups of these women that we met with had a history of fighting one with another from each tribe and each family. They didn't trust each other, and they didn't want to work together. But after we left, do you know what these women decided to do? They were going to meet together once a week as individual tribes of women and once a month as a region of women to take their problems that they couldn't fix on their own to their city-level government. What happened in the months that followed was that their city and their area became a more stable place. Now, it's hard to find one specific reason of why the insurgents were run out of the city by the local people. But can you help wonder that if these self-mobilized women had something to do with it? If mom's not happy, then no one's happy. Well, my time in Iraq was done. We packaged up the program and we sold it and we presented it to the commanding general of the Marine Expeditionary Force. And the torch was then passed to the next unit to continue on women's engagement. I knew it was time to go. My daughters needed me more than these Iraqi women, as much as I wanted to stay and help them. So I went home. And I spent the next 3 years as a mom and as a Marine marksmanship instructor, teaching Marines how to protect themselves and how to fight when they go over there. Kind of a sharp contrast from engaging women. But I found myself getting ready to redeploy, and this time to southern Afghanistan in Helmand Province. And I was looking forward, this time as a civil affairs Marine, to engage with the local people. And I was hoping to get a chance to work with the Afghan women. But do you know what I was told? It was going to be even more difficult to work with these women and talk with them because of the level of oppression. You know what else I was told? Because I was a female, I wouldn't be able to really interact and talk with men. In fact, that I wouldn't be able to question men. And this was frustrating because I thought, my job as a civil affairs Marine is to talk to the people. If I'm not allowed to get access to the women, and I'm not able to interact with the men, what am I going to do, sit around all day? I thought, at that point, they've got to be wrong. That's not the way it is. So I'm going to share with you what I learned about why women matter. Not just these women, but why those female servicemen and women matter in this environment. Why women matter. My preconceived notions and what I thought and believed in Iraq was so short-sighted from what I learned in Afghanistan. First, women matter because we are seen as a benevolent presence. And as one Afghan elder put it, he said, I know when I see the women, they're here to help. But when I see the men, they're here to fight. You know what that did? It gave us access, this presence, this benevolent presence. One Afghan elder, it was when I was working with him, he looked at me and he says, you're a woman, but you're kind of like a man because you're carrying this rifle around. You see, what I learned was that we were given the respect shown to men as females, but we were granted access to that home and family that's normally reserved to women. So as women, we had the best of both worlds. Because we had such an ability to show a good face and this positive presence and this image, we were able to gain some influence in the area with these Afghan people. One experience that one of my friends had was in Marja about 6 months ago during the start of the operations that I'm sure we've all heard in the news. She speaks Pashto, the language of the area, and she had a meeting with a local Afghan education director for the city of Marja. And later that day, during a large shura, where it's a large group meeting where hundreds of Afghan men from Marja, probably quite a few from Taliban, he stands her up and parades this young woman around and says to these men, this is what an educated woman looks like. This is what our woman should be. Now, can you imagine the influence that had? Because 27% of Afghans are literate, and less than 15% of the women can read and write. Now, if these Afghan men themselves couldn't read and write, and then they're being told that a woman should be educated, what's that doing to that Afghan men? Women matter because they have influence. Because we have a positive perception of ourselves, we're able to help them. We can only help these women and get access to them once we build relationships and do it through the local men. We get permission through the men. The first area I went in, the city of Nawa, in the district center there, I didn't know how I was going to be perceived. Instantly, the district governor and the district administrator, do you know what they started calling me? They called me their little sister. And because I was seen in a positive note, I had local men coming to me and saying, I've got this widow, I've got this other woman, they have these problems, you can help them. We have the ability to help. Women matter. This particular one, this is actually her happy face, believe it or not. She's a widow. And in this culture, the oldest son of the household, the oldest male, now the burden is placed upon him. He wasn't able to go to school because he had to beg and do odd jobs. She was also a landowner and a farmer. She was unable to farm because the irrigation pipe to her land broke. That's an easy fix. That's a quick project that we were able to fix within a matter of a month, getting a local Afghan contractor. Economic development is one way we can help these women. And now the son can go to school because she can farm. Women matter because we can help separate the insurgency from the population. Because we are seen as a benevolent presence, and because we are seen as there to help instead of there to fight, it's a double-edged sword, because we're anxious as a military to go and get the information and get that intelligence. But it shouldn't happen at the expense or put these local women and children and their families at risk. It's important, women matter, maintain that level of that positive perception that they have. Let me tell you the story. The local elder, one of the tribal elders in the Garmshire district, came to me and he said, "You guys think you're tricky." He was referring to another female engagement team that was working in the area. "You guys bring in a doctor and you bring in our women, and your females are collecting intelligence from our women." And I thought, well, that's weird. Why do you think that? And he said, well, that's what we used to do when I was in the Army 20 years ago. The Afghan people are very smart. They know if we're sincere with our engagements, and they also know if we have alternate motives when it comes to collecting information, especially from their women, their protected level of society. So it's important that we don't put them at risk. We can help with development. We can do a lot of things when it comes to influencing the next generation. Let me share with you a story about a group of women that were asking for something. And the reason why I'm going to do this is because my next point is that engagement creates expectations. Because we're seen as there to help instead of there to fight, and because we're American and there's a dollar symbol kind of embedded in our forehead, and they think that, oh, you're American, you can fix something right away. Well, not everything like the pipe can be fixed right away. These women in the Nowzad area were asking for jobs for themselves and teachers for their girls, because men aren't allowed to teach their female children. So what do you say to them? How do you manage that expectation without losing the hope and that relationship that you've built? Well, I decided one morning I had the answer. I was going to teach them how long it was going to take. This is what I did. I drew a picture of a seed. This one is actually from my daughter. Hers is better than mine, by the way. And I said, this is your garden of hope. Now this seed is a seed of a teacher. You hope you have a teacher. You hope you have jobs. But this is a special seed. It takes a long time for it to grow, and it takes the whole community to want to plant it. If at any point this community doesn't want to help this seed to grow, it stops growing. But if the whole community comes together and they help it grow, you will get to have a piece of fruit. You know what the woman said? You've opened our eyes. What can we do to help this seed to grow? I encourage them to work together as women, to take their problems to their husbands so their husbands can take it to the government. You know what they have now, and it's been 6 months? 25 of those women in that area are going through a health education program. And they have a girls' teacher. Women matter to build the influence and manage these expectations. But the question remains, as we're planting seeds of hope all over Afghanistan now, not just in Helmand Province with the Marines, are we creating a new generation of Taliban, fueled from the scorn and disappointment of these women from our engagements? We won't know for a long time. But what I do know is that women matter. There's a direct relationship between the security and the safety of women to the security of states. And if we're not using our enablers, our women, to do the things that they need to do, to encourage a generation and the next generation, because these stories are passed down. The Afghan people told me vivid stories of 30 years ago, and our engagements today will be passed on for the next 30 years. Women matter. It's who we are, not just who they are, who we need to talk to, both the men and the women, and what we need to do after the engagement.